excited. This is actually my second ever Simpson, so yeah. Yeah, I know. Way to set the bar low, I guess.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready. Okay, so this is a true story about greed, immigration, a booming economy, environmental destruction, and eggs. And it's really about how the Farallon Islands played a central role in San Francisco's early history. And it begins with the common murre. These are called the penguins of the north because penguins actually only live in the southern hemisphere. They're medium to large water birds. They're great divers, swimmers, and flyers. They're kind of awkward on land, and they migrate really long distances along the coasts of North America. They're pursuit divers, so they use their wings for propulsion. They eat lots of schooling fish and a variety of other marine invertebrates. And when murres are feeding their young, they actually return with only one fish at a time, which is having an effect on them right now. One of the murre's main breeding and feeding habitats is the Farallon Islands, also called California's Galapagos. The islands are 27 miles southwest of the Golden Gate. They're one of the things that you can see on really clear days if you're coming along Pacifica on Highway 1, if you look west. The average water depth here is about 300 feet surrounding the island, but as you start to get closer towards the continental shelf, the ocean floor plunges to about 2 miles deep. And it's this topography, as well as spring winds, that have a huge effect on creating a nutrient-rich current that allows hundreds of organisms to prosper on these islands and use them for feeding grounds and breeding grounds. Farallones are actually one of the most largest breeding seabird colonies south of Alaska. Western gulls and common murres are some of the most abundant birds in the Farallones, and they breed in these really high-density colonies called lumaries, which I love that word, lumaries. And currently the islands are protected. They're part of the Farallon National Wildlife Refuge, established in 1909. They're not open to the public. They're accessed only by a small number of wildlife biologists and resource managers. And it wasn't actually like this for all of human history. January 24th, 1848, gold is found in California. San Francisco, being the main port of California, gets a huge population boom, as well as the rest of the state, with lots of detrimental effects to Native American populations and the environment. That's another talk. And San Francisco wasn't set up to accommodate this boom. There's basics that are in short supply, including food. There's a lack of a hen population, which means there's a lack of eggs, which means that there's no baking, and basic foodstuffs are very short supply. So word spreads quickly about the abundance of fresh meat and eggs that exists on the Farallon Islands. And prior to the 1850s, it was Russian seal hunters who were the first to do large-scale egg collecting of mostly the common murre eggs. So a little bit about the eggs of murres. They're this beautiful blue-green to gray-brown. They kind of have this mottled color on them. They're large, and they're pear-shaped. And this shape is actually really important because rather than falling over and rolling off of a cliff, they usually roll in a circle. They're also really thick shells, which makes them really durable for transporting. So in 1849, this man, Dr. Robinson, sails to the island. He starts collecting eggs, and on his way back, even though he loses half of his cargo in a shipwreck, he's able to make enough money to found a pharmacy and create this corporation, the Pacific Egg Company, which claims rights to the island. So they hire lots of Greek and Italian recent immigrants to work and pick during the egg season, which is May to June. And when they go out and pick, they have to destroy all of the eggs that they see because they want the freshest eggs possible for the market. Murres mostly nest on cliffs, and that's really treacherous for the individuals collecting. So accidents and eggs or injury are super common, and very few of these get reported. Lots of people start coming to the island because they want to be able to get eggs as well, and they don't understand this notion of something being private property in the 1850s. And so lots of people start coming there, and tensions get really high as they encroach upon this claim. That reaches a peak in 1863 when several boatloads of Italian fishermen storm the islands. They actually bring a cannon, and they sit up at the bay, they drink overnight, everybody gets really crazy, and in the morning they start shooting at each other, these two different sides. 2 men die, 1 on either side, and 5 men are wounded. Eventually the federal government steps in and says the egg company can have the monopoly there, and they continue to take the eggs, but that has a huge negative effect on the murre population, which means they don't get as many eggs. Chickens come to the west coast, that also affects the company. Eventually, egging becomes banned, and the Farallones become a wildlife refuge. The murre population picks back up and currently has a global count of about 18 million. So it kind of ends in a positive story. But So we can look back on all this, and we can say that a gun battle over the right to steal wild bird eggs is totally barbaric and arcane, but I think 170 years from now, people are going to look back on our wars over natural resources and how we have access to those things and think we're probably equally as arcane. The greed of the gold rush is very much not a thing of the past, and I believe that only through conservation, education, and actions towards more sustainable living can we all avoid the mistakes of the past. And I think that we have that in our capability every single day. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. I also had, I think, in the notes field some mirror sounds, if you wanted to hear those. If it gives you under settings, I think you can pop up notes. But otherwise, I can take any questions. Or I can talk more about birds. Yeah.
What's a mirror egg taste like?
So that's really interesting. I was looking into that. A lot of, they're not as preferable as chicken eggs. They're kind of thick. My understanding, if you've ever had a goose egg, they're kind of similar to that. Apparently when you cook them, the egg yolk, you cook a regular egg and the yolk just turns a little bit yellow to kind of a, almost maybe darker orange. These would turn red, which made them not as desirable, but they didn't have anything else. So that was kind of what they went with. Yeah. It's okay if it doesn't come up.
Which slide is it on?
It was on the last slide.
Oh, I'm not seeing it.
That's okay. You can find mirror sounds on Audubon. They sound a lot like penguins. I'll do an impersonation. They do this very loud, like very. It's for a relatively small bird. It's surprising how loud they get. Yeah.
Was there a reason why this particular bird's eggs were like plundered? Like, why weren't there other birds that were sort of gone after?
So they went after western gull eggs as well, but the western gull eggs have a little bit of a softer shell, so they weren't as easy to transport.
And also on the Farallon?
And on the Farallon, so it's 27 miles, it's 1850s, you have to sail. Rough waters in the Pacific, rough waters in the spring, which is when birds lay their eggs. The winds pick up in the spring, and so all of those factors made it much harder for them to get them here. And so the mirror eggs were, A, there was more of them, but B, they were just a thicker shell and durable, so as a commodity, they worked really well for them. Yeah. Even though they weren't as preferable in the taste. I was, again, reading the literature, there was every single available meat stub in San Francisco basically got eaten. Whether it was deer, fowl, chicken, anything that was here basically was eaten. And then they went to the islands, and these eggs were essentially in large supply in what was left. So, yeah.
Are there any natural predators on the Farallon Islands that eat the eggs?
So currently there are, because there's been introduced species. There's a mouse that's a huge issue. They're starting to get a little bit of a handle on that, but there's lots of complications involving that. Other predators, there might be some other bird predators on that island, but to my knowledge, it's only the invasive mouse that's the big issue. It's so isolated from so many other things. That's why it's such a great breeding quality. And like I was saying, with the topography, they can feed, so they can go and feed their young really easily. So it's ideal conditions for them.
Yeah, there's not really places to dock ship. I've been out there once, and there's
cool.
really no places to dock ships out there. So like they must have passed it by when they were going into San Francisco, right? Like coming in, because. Did they stop there? Was there like an outpost there?
There wasn't much of an outpost. They created a lighthouse. There was like there's a small bay where they could dock, but there wasn't like a formal harbor that they could create. All of those conditions made it really difficult for the collecting, but there was nothing here. So I think I had a slide about how much they sold for. They went for a lot of money, so it was really lucrative. So that's why people would risk their life for it. I saw another couple hands.
Sounds.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I don't know who's next. Yeah.
I think you said they collected like 500,000 eggs?
Over the course of the peak of the highest season. So in 1 2-month period, 500,000 was the peak.
So do we have any idea of like what the population was when they started, and then what it shrunk to?
Oh, that's a great
and
question.
Then maybe like where is it today?
They probably could do some kind of estimate. The population is good today. It's a species of least concern on IUCN, which is a space that studies and determines the conservation of different species. The global population isn't 18 million, so it's not that much of a concern. But the minimal, I think in the 1950s when oil spills were really big and when they were sort of starting to see the effect, the real big decline over so many years of egging, the population reached a low of about 6,000. That was kind of the bottleneck point, which is pretty low for a bird species, which is now numbering in the millions. So yeah.
How did that bottleneck affect gene flow?
Like anything, we don't entirely know. Probably, I have a theory. Again, this is my own personal theory that it affects their mating adaptations and a variety of other things, but we don't entirely know. Probably, it does start to affect genes, but we're just now starting to be able to see that, to be able to do studies on that. Yeah.
And, do you know how many other bird species there are on those islands?
I think there was a number on the slide. It's been a while since I dragged this out. So I think it was around 20 something. There's several other bird species that end up there. The western gulls are the other big ones that I know about. There's probably several different pelican species. There's probably a couple of smaller bird and sparrow species. Cormorants, I'm sure, are there. Pretty much anything that you're going to see along this part of the coast, anything that you'd see at Ocean Beach down to Half Moon Bay is probably going to be out there, either nesting or feeding. Yeah.
There was a lone gannet there, northern
cool.
gannet there, a few years ago that people flew here from other countries to see.
Are there puffins out there? I can't remember if there were puffins. Yeah, are there puffins? Okay, yeah. So there's some pretty rare species that just, auklets, yeah. There's some rare species that just come just out there, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
I'm sorry if you covered this when you're
No.
glancing through slides, but how did this company claim the Falkland Islands? Was it like Homesteading Act, and they're just like, we're here, so it's ours?
Yeah, essentially. So that was again another totally separate topic. But California in the 1850s had lots of strange things about claim. So it was a new republic. It was a newish state. So people could essentially, if you got here on the ground, you could just be like, "This is mine. I'm here." And the state was like, "Okay, great, have it." And then people would fight over it, and they'd be like, "No, it's mine." I think there was a lot of that kind of craziness happen. So a guy went out there. He had enough money to start a company and to hire people, and he was like, "This is mine." And nobody in the state argued, and people wanted eggs, so they were like, "Okay, it's yours." That's essentially how the gold rush started. Somebody was like, "This is mine. I'm going to take what's out of the ground," and they were like, "Great, it's yours." Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry to come with
No.
questions, but did they ever collect guano off it?
I don't know about that. That's a really good question. I think the eggs were so profitable. I didn't actually look at that. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't, because there were people collecting seals, collecting meat. Guano might have been useful, but maybe not as lucrative. That's a good question, though. Yeah.
What would guano be used for? Fuel or
Fertilizer. I think that's a really good question. I don't know if there was. I'm assuming that ranching was starting to build up, so that would be a useful resource. There might have been easier ways to get it and transport it. It's hard to get out there on a boat. It's even harder to get out on a wind-propelled boat and to get back. And when they're going, in the spring, winds are at their peak. So yeah, it's pretty rough. Did I miss anybody? No. Yeah.
I don't know if you missed me, but the egg is 11% of the female's body.
Okay.
Which seems like an insane ratio to me. How does that compare to other animals that lay eggs?
I did this like 10 years ago when I was in a marine bio class, and I kind of put together the last minute. I remember looking up that statistic when I was doing this, and I've completely forgotten it. It's high in terms of the size of the egg, in terms of the size of the bird. The ratio. They're one of the few birds that has such a off ratio. Most birds, it's pretty similar to their size. I feel like hummingbirds, though, maybe have a relatively large egg.
Because they'd have to be like...
Yeah, because but it's been so long since I looked at that, I really don't know. I know that it is pretty big. Like, these are relatively large-sized eggs for a bird that's about that big. So it's a huge amount of their body weight.
So the eggs are that big?
Yeah, they're about that big. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're relatively large. I mean, they vary in size. I think they got smaller over the years, so older collections have some about that big. And that shape there's all kinds of different things about why that shape is so great for being able to incubate the chick inside there. Yeah. Are we? Yeah.
Well, sorry, but you
last question.
You did hit one really interesting issue. You said the average size of the egg shrunk over the years.
I would assume, yeah.
Is that a natural selective pressure there?
I would probably, yeah. I mean, I don't have the stats on that, and I don't want to make too much of a leap in front of this crowd, but I'm gonna assume that over years and years of harvesting the largest eggs, over time, it's gonna have a major effect. I'm assuming it's gonna bounce back because I don't know. I mean, they were doing it for 40 years, so that's conceivably so many generations. That's gonna eventually have an effect. But the other issue too is that there wasn't that many West Coast groups that were collecting. So the collection of an egg untouched from pre-1850s, I don't even know if there's that many of those. So to be able to study that, I don't know. It could be a good thesis.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Great. Thank you all so much.